to the Way to Be podcast. This is where we chat about all things health professions, partnerships, and practice. And today we are in for a treat. I'm your co-host, Rachel Glade, along with my colleague.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Rosenzweig.
And today we have the incredible Dr. Valarie Fleming here to talk to us. We are so thrilled to have her. She has had a great history, not only as a speech language pathologist, but also as an administrator in higher education. And so we are thrilled to have her with us today. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Fleming.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
So we're so excited to hear about your path. Could you tell us a little bit about how and why you became an SLP, and then what twists and turns your career took until you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. So I, like a lot of first generation students, and in fact, when I was in school, you really didn't hear that term often, thought I was going to college to become a doctor, right? That's what you hear, being a doctor, teacher, lawyer. And I was going to be a doctor until I started taking my first batch of science classes. And I was like, maybe this is not the career for me. But I always had interest. In fact, I wanted to be a doctor of rehabilitation medicine. But, maybe doctor wasn't it. And there was a physical therapy program. I was like, yeah, maybe. Little interest in teaching. They had a really aggressive kind of teacher recruitment program at the University of Central Arkansas. So I got involved in that. And then one day I saw a person who's actually a colleague of ours, Rachel, Byron Ross. He was a graduate student at the University of Central Arkansas. I didn't know what his major was at the time, but he was signing in the courtyard one day. And so I asked him what he was doing, and he told me what his area was. And he was a GA for the sign class. And he told me about speech language pathology, and it was love. It had the health aspect, it had the teaching aspect, the rehab aspect. And I went and changed my major. That was right before my sophomore year. I had to take all of the prerequisite courses, sign language, A&P, phonetics. I took them all in one semester because this was it. I was going to take this major, and you had to apply to the junior sequence. And I loved it. I ended up going to the University of Memphis for my master's degree, where I met Joyce Harris and worked in her lab as for my special project. And then took time off and got my C's. I worked in early intervention. That always tickled my students because, as you know, I do adult neurogenics as my background. But for my C's, I took a job in early intervention, working in a 2-year-old classroom, primarily children with autism. And it was a great experience. But it confirmed that I was interested in adults. Really hard to get that hospital job when you don't have your C's. But after that, I went to get my PhD at the University of Texas at Austin, where Joyce Harris moved to. And I wanted to work in her lab and study cognitive linguistic aging. Did that and took a job in academics. And so while I was working on my PhD, I spent 5 years working in a healthcare system there. I did acute care, I did inpatient rehab, I did skilled nursing. I did outpatient therapy, and I had a ball while I was working on my PhD. And then, so I took a job at Texas State University as an assistant professor, doing research and having a good time in my research lab and figuring out what I wanted to be when I grow up. Got interested in mild cognitive impairment. I did a little research there. Did the traditional tenure track stuff, became tenured. And shortly after I got tenured, I became a department chair. It was not expected, was not on my 5-year plan. In fact, it was nowhere on my plan. But we got in a situation as a department where we needed a leader. I had been graduate program director for a while and had picked up some things, and the faculty thought I'd be a good chair. I almost turned it down because, again, it was not on my plan. But other people saw something in me that I did not yet see in myself. My advisor, Joyce Harris, said, I have no clue where you got this interest in administration from, but I went for it, and it was good to me, and I think I've done a lot of good work. Fast forward lots of years at Texas State University, about 16. I did 6.5 as department chair, a couple of years as assistant vice president for curriculum and academic programs, lots of leadership training and things of that nature. And now I'm the senior associate vice chancellor for academic and faculty affairs at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center in Memphis. So that's lots of twists and turns, Elizabeth.
It absolutely is. But you've said so many things that are sparking questions that I
Sure.
have that I want to hear more about. But I'll let Rachel ask the next one.
I mean, I think it's really incredible. I mean, you went through, kind of your different path. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the field of speech language pathology too, is oftentimes there are doors that open that you don't even realize are doors whenever you first start in the profession. I mean, you may have started thinking, oh, I wanted to head down this clinical route, maybe want to work with adults, and then, ended up in this on this path to administration, and you're clearly an amazing administrator that our field and other faculty need as well. So I think it's a really cool avenue to think about that actually we haven't had a chance to talk about much here yet on our podcast. So I'm so grateful you joined us today. My question is a follow-up to that. So tell us a little bit about, like, what does your current role look like, and what do you like best about it?
So in my current role, I'm a senior associate vice chancellor of academic and faculty affairs. And so really what that means is that I'm responsible for all of the things that support academic affairs, academic programs, and faculty. So in my portfolio, I have academic affairs. I have the Teaching and Learning Center, or the TLC. I have international affairs. I have faculty affairs. I have the health science libraries. I have a big portfolio.
Lots of free time.
I mean, I get bored sometimes. And then the simulation center. And so, and it's important because those things have to be coordinated in order to make academic programs healthy and successful. But really, the part that I love most about it is helping make faculty successful. And so a lot of my role is looking at the faculty life cycle, making sure we have smooth promotion and tenure processes. I work closely with my colleagues in student success. And I always like to say, well, if you're going to have successful students, you have to have successful faculty. And so looking at those things that can be barriers to retention of faculty, looking at the things that will help recruit faculty and make them want to be here at the Health Science Center. Those are the things that get me excited.
Wow, that is a huge portfolio. I was so interested to hear you talk about the simulation center, because that may be something that our listeners didn't get a chance to participate in when they were doing their clinical training, or maybe their current faculty thinking about that. Can you tell us a little bit more about the simulation center?
Sure. Our simulation center, the official name is the Center for Healthcare Improvement and Patient Simulation, better known as CHIPS. We call it CHIPS affectionately. It's about a 45,000 square foot building, and it has everything from very low fidelity skills training, things like, how to take a blood pressure, things of that nature, all the way up to high fidelity mannequins. There's a suite where the mannequins give birth. There's a surgical suite. There are, really interesting things. We have a huge list of standardized patients. And so it's really remarkable how it enhances education here at UT Health Science Center. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's one of those things that people want to see the building when they come in, and they're very interested in knowing, how can I play? But it's not for play. It is really an integrated part of our curriculum and a very important part of our interprofessional education here at UT Health Science Center.
Yeah, what a cool chance to get to practice the role of an SLP in a medical setting in tandem with colleagues who are learning to be PTs or nutritionists or all of these kind of things. That is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to circle back to when you were sharing your story. You mentioned that you were a first gen student, and as a fellow first gen, I know how scary it can be in that process. And so I wonder, like, what recommendations might you have for maybe students that are listening, or maybe people that are thinking about the field of speech pathology that are maybe first gen? What would you recommend for those folks?
For me, it really was a fluke that I ran into the field. It was not on my plan. I had no idea what it was. Once I knew, I remembered back to elementary school where there was the speech teacher, right? But I really didn't know it as a profession. And so my advice would be, to talk to others, meet others, and really find out what you're passionate about. You don't have to follow the path that someone else has planned for you. There might be something that really speaks to your talents and your passions that you really just may not have a name for yet. And so don't be afraid to explore those things and don't be afraid of changing your mind. It's okay. You're not disappointing people because you didn't do, what you set out to do. It's really thinking more about long term, what's going to make you happy?
Gosh, I feel like that should be a t-shirt, right? You don't have to follow the path someone else set for you. Oh my goodness. That's amazing. We need some logos or stickers of that. And Dr. Fleming says.
Yeah.
You also spoke about meeting people who really were mentors and who inspired you. You spoke about the graduate student who you saw signing and the professor whose lab you worked in. Who are other people who have been mentors to you along the way?
So yes, I mentioned Joyce Harris. That's where I got the research bug, getting the opportunity to work in her lab and do a special project at the University of Memphis. But in her lab, she had PhD students that also took the master's students under their wings. So one of them was Dr. Constance Qualls, and that's who I think I got the administration bug from. She was a long-term department chair at Buffalo State University in New York, and seeing her as she had her kind of leadership development, I think it did put something in the back of my mind like, oh, she did that. I could do that too. She was often one early on that I would talk to and ask questions to. Man, there's so many mentors. I had a mentor through ARC, one of our American Speech Language Hearing Association. I had the privilege of getting one of those awards. And so through that, I was assigned a mentor. And so also Carl Quello from University of Connecticut. So many. I will say those who do adult neurogenic disorders were such a small part of ASHA, but really embrace students who are trying to do research in that area and people growing careers in that area. So almost too many mentors to name, and I'm afraid I'm gonna forget someone, but lots and lots. That's something I think we do really well as a profession. If we see someone who's interested, people take the time, even if it's just something as simple as saying an encouraging word or providing a resource or making a network or a connection. I think that's what we do really well in our profession.
I love that you highlight that, we are a profession that really functions best when we're lifting up others. I think that's key. And I also think it's cool that you said there are too many mentors to mention, because I think sometimes maybe when you're first starting in the field, it may seem like you're kind of on a lone island, like, okay, I'm searching. I think I might be interested, but I don't know where to go. But it sounds like you had you maybe made some connections, maybe through ASHA and maybe through some of your education that, really helped to guide your path, future. So I think that's great mentions and also great pro tips, right? For those that are thinking about it. I wonder, along your path, because you mentioned you kind of worked in EI for a little bit and then you're like, well, that was to get my C's, and then you decided to go toward the neurogenic path. Was there a specific maybe thing that happened that your aha moment of like, okay, this is why I'm in speech language pathology, or this is why I do what I do? Do you have any stories or memories like that come to mind?
I'll say I really enjoyed working in the EI population. I loved how the parents were excited because I was in that 2-year-old classroom. Sometimes those were those students' very first words. They happened in a treatment session, right? Because they weren't keeping up with their peers. For me, it was the research aspect of the adult, right? There's so many unanswered questions, so many things to capitalize upon with spontaneous recovery and recovery after rehab and getting back to knowing the things they were aware of, the things they were unable to do anymore. Whereas I felt like in the early intervention, they didn't know yet, right, what they didn't have. And so for me, that was the driving force of, okay, this is what I want to research. Absolutely enjoyed treatment. Again, I got the instant gratification there, right? Because, a kiddo who maybe wasn't saying anything and suddenly was imitating, quack, quack or woof, woof, because I was doing it over and over in pretend play. And so those parents, their faces, when they would change, they were like, I just heard my child's voice. And it wasn't crying, they were speaking. And so those are some of those things that made me say, oh, wow, this is what I want to do. Um, Patient recovery. Again, sometimes I know it was spontaneous recovery, but because we as the SLPs were coming every day doing feeding and swallowing and language therapy, you got to see patients and their families see that recovery and that thrill of, okay, they're still in there, they're coming back to me. Those are those aha things that make me excited about the profession.
So incredibly rewarding, right? I just think it's the absolute best. Obviously, that's why we're all here.
Mhm.
But you spoke about your passion for adult neurogenics and how there are so many unanswered questions. Tell us more about that. What questions do you still have, even after all these years of research and work that you've done? Where do you see that kind of subspecialty in our field
Mhm.
going?
So for me, working under Joyce Harris, she was always one who was on the periphery of the profession, right? She intertwined anthropology, linguistics, those things that we don't really think about sometimes as a profession. Cognition, right? When we were coming up was very separate from language, but through her lab, I was able to see how intertwined cognition and language were, how intertwined they were, and what resulted was I ended up writing one of the first empirical based papers. Actually, I think it was the first in our profession. You'll have to fact check me on that, Rachel, on mild cognitive impairment and language in our field, because we hadn't collected data. It was really cutting edge back then when I was, a graduate student. In fact, I went to an some ASHA thing. I want to say it was one of those really unique ASHA learning things. I don't know if it was one of the grant writing ones or something, but we got to hear from Dr. Alan Badley on working memory, and he was talking about his model, and he totally skipped over the central executive. And he's like, "Oh, we don't know that much about that," and I was like, "That's what I want to know about because that's what I think is going on when we talk about language." And so I really got into executive function and cognition and what happens to us as we age. And I still think that's an area that'll need more exploration. What can we do to quickly assess how someone's doing? Again, we did the communication wellness checkup. That was great work I did with Joyce and Tom Marquardt and Swati Kiran. They were all on my dissertation committee. But this idea, you go and you get your blood pressure checked, you get your heart rate checked, but no one says, "Hey, how are you thinking? How's your communication?" And so I still think there's some work to be done there so that we can quickly assess how someone's communication changes because of changes in cognition. That would be one of the places I still think that it'll show up before it shows up anywhere else. And so I think the more work that we can do there so that we can get earlier and earlier identification, we get earlier and earlier intervention and help kind of stop those effects of aging. Now I was looking at recent papers. People are using machine learning to identify some of these changes early in communication. I'd be very interested to see how that works with artificial intelligence and predicting language models and how we can use that for assessment and early treatment.
That's so fascinating, right? To think about, after a certain age, you're recommended to get a mammogram every X number of years or
Mhm.
have your cholesterol screened. What if we added in some of this cognitive communication screening? Because, like you said, then we could catch it so much earlier and potentially provide a lot more and better help to people. That's a
Mhm.
really cool concept to see, especially as the population ages. I think that's only going to become more and more important.
And right now, it's such a heavy lift to do those things. I mean, when I was working on my dissertation, it was hours and hours of listening to transcripts and looking for very subtle things. Can we get it faster? Can we get it quicker without all of this really laborious transcription and analysis? That's the next step.
Gosh, I love that. A couple of things that stood out to me over the last few minutes. You mentioned, you kind of started with this interest, in working with adults, but also you immediately valued having input from a variety of fields. And I think sometimes, especially in higher education, sometimes we can kind of get stuck thinking, oh, I need a very strict and straight, rigid research agenda, and I need to stay the course. But what you're saying is, hey, there's value in thinking about how does linguistics play in this? How do other areas, I mean, gosh, could even be nutrition or family
Mhm.
support or all these other areas, psychology, that could play a role as well. So I love that you kind of highlighted that because I think sometimes we may miss that in higher education, um, for sure.
Ab- Absolutely. Even when we think about our curriculum and how we teach students, right? SLPs didn't write the books on education. Really, that was done in the education field. And so I used a lot of, when I started thinking more about my administrative roles and making the field more accessible to future students and making students feel involved and included in our profession, I really leaned heavily on the people in the field of education, Dr. Banks and people of that nature who are writing about transforming the curriculum. That wasn't SLP stuff. That was out of the field of education. And so we have to embrace all of the full body of knowledge that's out there because we as SLPs, we're still the new kids on the block when it comes to professions. How do we incorporate those other things? That's really that interprofessional, education and interprofessional practices. What are all the pieces and bodies of knowledge out there that we can pull from to help influence our profession?
So
I'm
you've
curious.
had, oh, go ahead, Rachel.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So you've had a lot of years in administration and leadership. I'm wondering what kind of lessons in leadership you could share, either for listeners who maybe are thinking of going into academic administration or SLPs in different settings who just want to be leaders wherever they are.
I would say know your craft, right? That's the foundation of it. It's knowing your profession, knowing who we are and what we need to become. But then it's situating our profession in the broader story. Sometimes we as SLPs and audiologists, we focus just on our department or just on communication disorders. And that was something I started as a department chair. I started bringing in conversations from across campus within the department. We were focused on the issues that impacted us, clinic and class space. And it's like, there's this strategic plan we need to be a part of. If we need resources, we need to write our goals based on the university goals or show how we help them realize those goals. They wanted to, have more community action. We have a clinic that, serves the whole community. We need to talk about that. If we're talking about that there's going to be budget cuts across campus, then we need to know then how do we implement that in our department and show that we bring value to the university? And I think that's hard for us as SLPs sometimes and ideologists. We're very singularly focused sometimes on us and our problems. But if we're not a part of the broader conversation, we get left behind. We're some of the most expensive programs on campuses. We can't sit 200 students in a classroom like an English major or a math class. We're very specialized and we only can serve a few students at a time, but we have to be able to articulate the value we bring to campuses.
But I think that's also great advice for any setting, right? SLPs
Mhm.
need to be better at how do you articulate what are you bringing to this organization and align that with the organization's mission, whether that's a campus, whether that's a health care system, a school, whatever it is.
Absolutely. And not being afraid to get outside of our comfort zone and make those networks across campus again. Just like we think about different bodies of knowledge, think about the different things that are on campuses, that are at your school, that are in the hospital. How do we connect it and intertwine and work with them to bring additional value to what we do?
Yeah, I mean, I could even see that being something maybe in like a rehabilitation setting, for example, like maybe someone
Mhm.
wants to start a particular specialized group that meets, so if they get that, if the first answer is no, well, then maybe think about restructuring the ask to make sure that you're saying, okay, well, this is how this fits into what we're trying to do here in this larger location. I think it's great to think about that.
Mhm.
As a follow up question about leadership, I'm sure you've probably, well, you've already mentioned you've had some great leaders to learn from in your path. What might be like some leadership characteristics that you think, what are characteristics of great leaders that you think set people up for success? What do you think that might be?
Um, Compassion
Hmm.
and empathy. For me, every day it's putting myself in the shoes of other faculty, of students. Probably one of the best compliments that I got was how well I took care of faculty and staff during the pandemic. But it was because more so thinking about what do people need? Yes, we've got to finish courses, but being courageous enough to make decisions at the right time without seeking permission. Now, my dean didn't always agree with the decisions I made, but based on the information in front of me and reading policies and understanding what authority I had in my role, I was able to make some decisions, but it was really because I was putting myself in the place of students who didn't have Wi-Fi perhaps, and students who lived further away from campus, and students who maybe didn't have health care and insurance and could go and get, a negative test right away. And so it's that empathy. I think a strong leader has to have a heart for the people that they're serving, right? It's not a role, you don't take a role for having the role's sake or the title's sake, but really thinking of it as a service, right? I'm providing a service. I'm going to lead people. I'm going to provide them what they need to be successful at what they're doing. That's what a leader should be doing, no matter the setting.
I love the mention about it's not the title that matters. It's truly like embracing the responsibility of the role to serve the people. I think that's again, we're just tossing out golden nuggets for t-shirts and slogans. I feel like around here.
You reminded me, I had, when I was at Texas State and was assistant vice president, the staff, the ladies I worked with in that office, they made me t-shirts. Apparently they were writing down some of the things I said. So I have a collection. I have a collection of shirts. There's one that says I talk to myself because I need an expert opinion. Because I was like, oh, I'm just talking to myself. I'm talking to myself. Or what was the other one? No, you can't have an extension. I always would say, no, we can't extend that. And so, hey, happy to do a t-shirt. Let's do some t-shirts, Rachel. Let's get all over it.
I love it. We'll start the merch. So looking at the higher education landscape and the landscape of speech language pathology and audiology as a profession, what do you either envision or hope for, or both, over the next decade or so? What trends do you see? How do you think that we can encourage students into the field and support them into the professions? What are your thoughts?
I think we're going to have to prepare as a profession. Again, I mentioned earlier, sometimes we as communication professionals, we get really siloed and singularly focused. But if you pull back a little bit and look at the big picture, there's not a higher education setting that's not talking about enrollment and a potential enrollment cliff that's going to happen in the next 5 to 6 years. In my head, I'm always thinking, what are we doing to prepare? And so I've been a part of some think groups and some other things that are starting to prepare. We have always been a profession where we've had the luxury of really long wait lists and lots of applications in our field. We build it, they come. Well, that's not going to be true really soon. And so how are we preparing? We're not cheap programs to run by any means for any institution. And so doing the things to show the value that we bring, that we have clinics. Yes, they're expensive, but they're bringing services to the community. Are there different models that we can do? One of the things we can do is increase the size of our undergraduate program, but be okay with everybody may not get a master's degree or PhD in communication disorders, but there's so many other professions out there that they could be prepared to do in healthcare services, as aides, as assistants, and be okay with that. I think for so long we were focused on getting people into master's programs right away or AUD programs, but that's not the only path. And I think we have to embrace these other paths so that we continue to be relevant and cost effective for institutions of higher education. Failure to do that, then it puts us, in serious turmoil, but we know people need our services. And so what are the ways that we can provide services? What are the ways or the professions people can do in addition to going to graduate education? Because graduate education won't be for everyone, but we sure can put some bachelor's degrees that give people really round skill sets to do lots of different things in graduate programs in other areas as well.
That's a good point, right? The demand is not going anywhere. If anything,
No,
it's just going
it's
through.
going up.
But the supply and how we meet that is the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then again, we have to speak the currency of other higher education administrators, right? They're looking at the financial aspect. How many semester credit hours do we generate? How many people do we have butts and seats in these programs? And sometimes we can't meet that demand because we have very strict criteria, right? We have to have highly trained individuals. And so we can't do 200 at a time, but we can do more undergraduates and they can help fill some other positions that need to be filled to support our healthcare system. What are those? What are those positions they can do in our educational system that support education of K through 12?
Awesome. Well, my goodness, I feel like we've just taken in so much information and already learned so much from you. So no, I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think it gives people a lot of things to think about. Again, like a lot of times when you think about speech language pathology, you're thinking about clinical service provision, you're thinking about, how's my clinical documentation? What does my diagnostic process look like? Serving families. But I think it's interesting to think about this, it's really kind of adjacent side of thinking about leadership with not only within our field, but even within, maybe our organization or our institution or whatever the case may be. So I think it's just great to think about.
And it's the same in any organization. I know my context is higher education, but if you're in a rehab setting, that rehab director and that, health administrator who's responsible as the CEO or CFO of the hospital or rehab center, they're thinking the same thing. They're looking at the bottom line, right? What is our return on investment? And so if we can't rise to the occasion and show that value, it makes it really tough on us. And so we have to think about all of the ways in which we bring value through our profession.
All right. Well, I think that brings us to our rapid round of questioning time, if you're ready for it.
Okay, I'm going to put 90 seconds on the clock. You can pass any questions that you can't think of an answer to or don't want to answer. And so here we go. 1 minute, 30 seconds on the clock. Rachel, you get the first question. On your mark, get set, go.
Coffee, tea, or soda?
Coffee.
If your office had a mascot, what would it be?
The Energizer Bunny.
Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
What's your favorite vacation spot?
Cancun.
Morning person or night owl?
Morning person.
City or country?
Country.
Netflix or YouTube?
YouTube.
What's your favorite kind of cuisine?
Mexican food.
Fiction or nonfiction?
Definitely fiction.
What is your go-to trick for surviving boring meetings?
I make my to-do list. Don't tell anyone that.
So you see those bulleted lists. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise.
What snack do you keep in your office?
I have a drawer full of popcorn.
Instagram, Facebook, or X?
Facebook.
What is your favorite animal and why?
And I just think they're sweet and slow and just cuddly.
What is the strangest thing you've ever found in a wallet or purse or pocket?
Petrified gum. I forgot it was there and it was hard as a rock.
Well, that is 90 seconds. And what a note to end on.
Well, awesome. Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. We appreciate all of your insight and sharing a little bit of personal choices there at the end with us as well. But we appreciate you being open to that. I guess there's really just one thing left to say, and that is way to be, Dr. Fleming. We appreciate your time with us today. And who knows, maybe somebody listening or watching today may have heard your story and heard what we talked about and thought that maybe, just maybe, this might be a way to be for them too. So with that being said, we'll see everybody next time. And thank you all for joining us. Have a great day, everybody.